I recently got back into Yu-Gi-Oh! After starting to go through my old box set of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! The first 5 seasons. That's Yugi, Kaiba, all those old stuff. All of the OG cards like Trapmaster and Lejin, they're all here to play. They're all there. And I got up to I just finished Season 3, so I'm about to watch the Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie from 2004 that's set directly after Season 3. That introduced popular cards, well, not really popular, but one of my favorite cards. That card being the Blue Eyes Shining Dragon. For 2004, this was a really good card. It was immune to spells, traps, and monster effects that target it. And it gained an extra 300 attack points for every dragon in the graveyard. So if you were rocking a dragon deck and you had 20 dragons in the graveyard, that is 6,000 attack points onto this creature right here, giving it 9,000 attack points. That's crazy, isn't it? That's crazy. They intended for this thing to be an OP monster in the movie, that it was capable of defeating the god cards. It could destroy any monster, it said. But that's not on here, the effect of destroying any monster. But it is very hard to get rid of. It was also impossible to play, because the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon was required to tribute to summon this card. There is no other way to special summon this card. It says so right here. There's no other way to special summon it. You have to tribute a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. And the problem with the American card game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is it is a mess. It released as a mess. The very first 2 years was a mess. And people realized without regulation, you could destroy any deck with about 20 cards. So they had to limit and ban a bunch of cards to make the game playable and enjoyable. Because if you had a certain amount of cards, you could win any duel. But they also didn't release a bunch of cards that were already in existence in Japan ever since 1999. For example, the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon released in Japan, the OCG, the original card game, in 1999. It was usable and playable in all of the video games at the time, such as Forbidden Memories, one of the popular PS1 Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, one of the games that I recommend wholeheartedly. You could not get this card, though. They didn't print the American westernized version of the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon until 2006. 2 years after this card released. That's disappointing to me. It really is disappointing to me. And that made me want to make a video just generally talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I decided to get back into the card game just to look at them, not to actually play them on it, obviously. Because when I looked at some of the cards from recent booster packs from recent years released, here's a few of them that I found that just made me go, what the heck is going on? I stopped Yu-Gi-Oh! At about 2005, right around the time of GX coming into play. So that is nearly 20 years difference for all these new things to show up. There are XYZ summons now, such as the number 71 Ribarian Shark, which requires 2 level 3 monsters. I don't know if that's a fusion or if you just need 2 level 3 monsters. So say you have 2 Soldiers of Stone here, and you sacrifice 2 Soldiers of Stone, then you could summon this, I guess. I guess that's how it works. I don't know, but that's how I imagine it works. And then we have pendulum summons. What are those? I am even further lost, so I had to look them up. They, I guess, are hybrid cards. They could be there are monsters that are played as spell cards. They can also be played as monster cards. I don't know if they're played as both or one or the other. this card has a spell here. This is their spell effect, their pendulum effect. So if they're played as a pendulum monster, this is the pendulum effect that happens. So, this card in particular says, once per turn, you can target one other face-up card you control, destroy it. And if you do, set one metal foe spell trap directly from your deck. This is for the archetypes. After about 2005, they started to do more archetype decks. How the Gravekeeper set in, I believe, 2003 or 2004. I have a couple of those. Gravekeepers are a bunch of cards focused around Gravekeeper cards. What do I mean by that? Well, like say you play a monster that says, this is Gravekeeper's blah blah blah, and its effect says you can look through your deck and summon Gravekeeper's blah blah blah. So if you had that card, you could look through your deck and bring out a second Gravekeeper's card because of that. But this Gravekeeper's card might have an effect as well. And if this says blah blah blah, if you have Gravekeepers, this guy also on the field, increase this Gravekeeper's card by 200 attack points or something like that. You know, they're cards that support each other, spell cards that support each other. It's all about a theme deck. And that's what all of this is anymore, that most of these are. Metalfoes is part of the Metalfoes theme deck. So they're going to have a bunch of cards that are Metalfoes, I'm guessing. And then we have here Odd Eyes, Rebellion, Dragon Eye. Apparently this is a really good card from what I hear, but I can't use it because I don't have 2 level 7 dragon monsters in all of this stuff. I might, but they're old cards. So they might not be utilized properly. You know, I have a bunch of level 8 dragon cards, you know, like Blue Eyes, but I don't have a lot of level 7 ones from my knowledge. But it has a pendulum effect, and this is also an XYZ. It's like both an XYZ and a pendulum card. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea. And then we have Link cards. I have no idea what Link is, but I'm going to make a guess. I'm going to go out on a complete limb, and I could be 100% wrong. But here's my guess. You need to line up your cards properly, like this, in order to play a Link card. So if it's like that, then you can play your Link card and do whatever the heck its effect is. I don't know if it stays on the field or if it's just a one-turn thing before you return it to your extra deck or graveyard or whatever. But I'm guessing that's what a Link card does. So there's that. And then they also released a new kind of card to me called the Synchro Summons. Now, at least I think I figured out what the Synchro Summons are. You need a tuner card, and I do have quite a few of those. Let's see, we have one here. This is a Maiden with Eyes of Blue. It is a tuner card, as you can see right here. And apparently you have to sacrifice one tuner card and one non-tuner card. So you sacrifice these two, and you could summon this guy right here. To my knowledge, that's how it works, and if that's not how it works, then that's not how it works. But if it is, then that is how it works. Me, I come from an era where the most you had was fusion summons and ritual summons. That was the original era. To ritual summon a card, you needed a spell card ritual and whatever monsters that ritual says you need to get rid of to bring this guy out. And fusion cards, they were the most common and the most useless. Here's one from the first booster pack. It's garbage. This one's from Metal Raiders. It's a little bit better, but it's still garbage. Both of these cards require you to have a polymerization spell. This thing right here. The polymerization card, alongside the two fusion components. For example, Flame Ghost requires Skull Servant and Dissolver Rock. I have a Dissolver Rock to show you. I can at least show you a Dissolver Rock. And we're going to get into why a bunch of these cards, which never saw play in the actual play, this definitely never saw play, is look at this. You need both a Dissolver Rock and a Skull Servant and a Polymerization card in order to fuse to create the Flame Ghost card. Flame Ghost has a total of 1,000 attack points and has no effect. I can summon this Giant Soldier of Stone, which has 1,100 attack points, 1,300 attack points, and it can destroy your card that you had to have 2 components and a fusion card to make. That is 4 cards needed to make this card, and I have 1 card here that can destroy it. That is why this is pointless to me. This is pointless to most people, because the deck has a total of 40 to 60 cards. There are thousands and thousands of cards in this thing. Back in the first era, though, back in my day, there were maybe about 2,000 total by 2005. Maybe 2,000 to 3,000 cards total. Maybe less. That's not a lot compared to modern Yu-Gi-Oh! But back then, that was plenty. That was all you needed, really. But there's still a lot of cards that you don't want to have 4 cards taking up space. 4 cards here. You got 4 cards to make this guy. And when instead of that, I could have a tactic where I have 1 card and I sacrifice to summon. Let me find him. It's going to take me a second. I have him here. He is here somewhere. Here we go. Summon Skull. Instead of a 4-card combination to bring out this guy, I have a 1-card combination. We play our Soldier of Stone in defense mode, and on my next turn I sacrifice him, and I bring out the Summon Skull. That is 2 cards to bring out a card with 2,500 attack points. The Skull Knight, even though he is stronger than the Summon Skull, he requires 4 cards to bring him out. So he's a lot more difficult to bring out. You need the 2 fusion components in the hand or on the field, and a polymerization card to play to bring him out. That is a lot more difficult. Technically, it's only 3 cards, though, because this guy goes in your extra deck, so give or take. But there's still a lot more you have to worry about compared to just having this boy in your hand and just sacrificing 1 card. That's the difference. Back in the day, we had a lot of fusion cards that were useless. There are some useful fusions like the Thousand's Eyes Restrict, which you can bring out with, for example, a Magical Scientist, which you could sacrifice 1,000 life points to bring out Thousand Eyes Restrict immediately, which normally you would need, for example, a Relinquished, and you need to have the Ritual spell as tribute and subtribute monsters up to 1 star to bring out Relinquished. And then you would need to fuse Relinquished with Thousand Eyes Idol and a Polymerization to bring out Thousand Eyes Restrict. And if you do it the normal way, it is not useful. It is not feasible at all. But if you did it the Magical Scientist way, that is 1 Magical Scientist card that you need to bring out Thousand Eyes Restrict, instead of needing the tribute card, Thousand Eyes Idol. Relinquished would go in your extra decks. You don't have to worry about that. So that's 1, 2, and a tribute card. How many tribute cards did you need? I think about 1 or 2 tribute cards. So that's 3 to 4 cards to bring out Thousand Eyes Restrict the old way, the normal way, or just a Magical Scientist to bring out Thousand Eyes Restrict with 1 way. So the old card game did have a smaller card pool, but it had more of a variety in how you could compose and build your deck. Though if you were playing competitively, you really only needed about 20 cards to win the game. You needed a Jinzo, you needed a Magical Scientist, a Catapult Turtle, about a bunch of level 6 fusion cards in your extra deck. Maybe you had a Yatagarasu, maybe you had a Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, your Raigeki, card destruction, maybe. Then you had what's that lady's name? The one that you could use to summon monsters with 1500 or less defense. I have her right here. Here we go. This is the Witch of the Black Forest. Her, along with Sangan, could be used to bring in cards that act as card searchers. For example, Lajin, your main beater at the time, if you played a Witch of the Black Forest and she was destroyed in battle, she could search your deck and you could bring out a Lajin immediately. Or, better yet, you could just bring out Summoned Skull, which was your best beater at the time before Jinzo was summoned. But most people probably wouldn't even bother with him. They would use her to bring out a Magical Scientist. And then they would use a Sangan to bring out a Catapult Turtle. And once you had both of those on the field at the same time, it was essentially over, because they could bring out the combo of firing a bunch of fusion cards at the enemy until you won. Then the Yata Garasi with the Yata Lock. Like I said, 20 cards was all you really needed to beat most things. And I believe in the tournament in 2003 or 2004 had most players with about 20 cards in common. And that's really all you need. And that's where this game comes in, where it helps to mitigate all of the Gen 1 era stuff. A lot of these broken effects, a lot of these broken cards, they get rid of that. And a lot of the annoying stuff with fusion cards, like this guy here, they get rid of a lot of stuff with that. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by how they get rid of that? Well, I mean, most monsters with effects don't have effects in the sacred cards. And most stupid fusions, like, where's Flame Ghost? I had Flame Ghost, it was just shown it. Here it is. Most stupid fusions that require 2 cards to the polymerization to make a weak sauce card, you don't need to worry about that. So this card is just a normal monster in the sacred cards. It's just 1 card in your deck, and it actually doesn't have a big deck cost. We're going to talk about deck cost in a bit. And then we have this guy, and this guy doesn't have that big of an effect, that annoying of an effect. Broken cards like Monster Reborn have also been mitigated. Monster Reborn only brings back the most recent monster that was destroyed, and that is it. Change of Heart still works in that it takes control of the enemy's monster, so that's still okay. Dark Hole still wipes the board. You can only have 1 of those in the deck. Raigeki, you can only have 1 of those in the deck, but it wipes the enemy's monsters out. I think Harpy's Feathered Duster is limited. I don't know if it is 1 or 2, but Harpy's Feathered Duster still works as normal. The big 5 spells are there, but it does mitigate some things. And like I said, there is a tactic that you could use without these monster effects called the beater strategy, where if you had just a bunch of beater cards. So what do I mean by a beater card? This is a beater card, Lajin. He is 4 stars. You don't have to tribute summon anything at all. You just play him down, and he has 1800 attack. Back in that day, the old days of Yu-Gi-Oh!, this guy was stronger than most of the monsters you could play for 4 stars. He was better than all of these guys. He could destroy all of them without much problem. I do have a bunch of duplicates here. You could beat that guy. He could beat him. That's a duplicate, but I dropped it. I don't care. He's stronger than that guy. He's stronger than you. Stronger than you. You get the idea. This is just 1 Lajin, and most of the 4 stars monsters at the time could not stand up to this guy. That's why they call him a beater. If you had a Lajin in your deck, if you had 3 or 4 Lajins, back in early Yu-Gi-Oh!, you were considered a beater card, and you wouldn't be able to do anything. That's why we had defense monsters, like our Giant Soldier of Stone here. By playing a Giant Soldier of Stone in defense mode, you could withstand Lachin's onslaught for a turn. And on your next turn, you could sacrifice Lachin. Hold on. Not Lachin. You could sacrifice your giant soldier of stone to bring out... Where did I put him? I always put him somewhere where I don't want him. Here it is. You could sacrifice your giant soldier of stone to bring out a summoned skull. And this guy is also a beater of his own right. He is the one tribute summon beater, because he's the strongest one tribute summon card that you could get at the first time before the other booster packs like Metal Raiders and everything else came out. He was the best guy you had at the time that you could use to beat Lachin, because you had to bring out a single tribute summon card to beat Lachin. And normally, the only way you're going to be able to summon a card by itself would be a mystical elf or a giant soldier of stone or another Lachin. And that was the only way you were able to survive him. And that's why they call him a beater. And the beater strategy is the most popular strategy to use in the sacred cards. But they mitigate this. They force you to use weak sauce cards like Trapmaster, like the Mysterious Puppeteer, like let me find him, Dissolver Rock. Garbage cards like this guy, Dissolver Rock. This is the worst one of all three of these, because these two actually have effects. Dissolver Rock. You're gonna have a lot of cards like this in your opening deck, because in the sacred cards, every card has a deck cost. Lachin being one of the better cards in the game, because you don't need to sacrifice to summon him, and he has such a high attack points, is going to have a high deck cost. For example, Lachin here might have a deck cost of 200. Dissolver Rock, which has an attack points of 900 and defense points of 1,000, may have a deck cost of about 32. So you could place a bunch of cards of this tier over one card of that tier. And you need to have 40 cards in your deck, and you only have a certain amount of deck capacity when you start the game. So most of your cards are going to be around this tier versus being around this tier, because you have to have 40 cards in your deck to play. And if you only have enough deck capacity to have maybe 3 Lachins, and once you get 3 Lachins you are out of deck capacity, you still have to have 37 more cards in your deck. So you can't use Lachin at the start of the game. You could, but I wouldn't recommend it. So you have to use a bunch of weaker cards like Dissolver Rock and a bunch of other weaker cards that I have to take a lot of time to search through my card drawer to find, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to be pointing at him a lot. You may have a lot of cards that are weak like this, such as Doron. Though Doron is one of the most useful attack 900 cards that you're going to have at the start of the game, and I believe you have at least one Doron in your deck at the start of the game. Doron is one of the very few monsters that retains an effect in the game. Effects are supposed to be rare in sacred cards, and in early Yu-Gi-Oh! As well. I could show you a stack here. Here's a stack of cards. These are all monster cards. And all of these are normal cards with no effects, right? Well, I could show you another stack of cards. Hold on, let me put these cards away now. Here is another stack of cards. Let me find some. Here. This is your effect cards. These are monsters with effects. Not as many, huh? That's because effects were rare back in the day. It's completely reversed nowadays. Almost every monster in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Has an effect. Every single one of them does. Back in the day, you were playing with normal monsters, so most cards didn't have an effect. And if they did, it was very rare. Doron is one of those, and I think he's one of like 2 cards in your deck that has an effect. So be on the lookout for that. Doron's special effect is that he can duplicate himself. So if you play 1 Doron, you'll get 2 Doron, but you can't attack when you use an effect. That's one of the things that helps to mitigate how this game is played, and I really like that, because I've seen how some of these modern Yu-Gi-Oh matches go, and they can be gone by the second or third turn. Like, the first turn is incredible. You have a chain kick combo, and you have about 5 monsters on the field after your first turn, and you've gone through like 20 cards. And it's crazy, because every single card that you have in your deck is chained to another card, and that card is chained to another card, and that card is chained to another card, and it's crazy. It really is. That's how modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played. Back in this day, back in the Sacred Cards day, you don't get that luxury. You have a hand of, let's say, you got a hand of 5 cards. You can only play 1 monster. So you'll play Dissolve a Rock in attack mode. And you don't have any magic or spell cards, because most of your cards are monster cards, then you end your turn. That's all you can do. And most cards don't have effects, so that's it. That's all you got. And then their turn happens, and if they don't have a monster that has a higher attack points than 900, and they don't have any spells or traps in their hand, because most of your opponents have nothing but monster cards, especially this early in the game, then they will play a monster in defense mode, and that's all they'll do. And in this case, I have a Giant Soldier of Stone, because this is my example card. I only brought out a handful of example cards here. But that's what you had back in the day. The Legend of the Blue Eyes deck was a booster pack, was a bunch of weak sauce cards, but that is what you had to deal with. You were forced to use these cards because you didn't have a deck capacity to have good cards. And the way you get deck capacity, the way you increase your deck capacity to get better cards, is by winning duels. And the more duels you win, the better cards you can get, like the Giant Soldier of Stone, to be a big wall monster, so that your enemy, when they play their own Dissolver Rock, they cannot surpass you. Giant Soldier of Stone is an amazing wall monster. And then, if you play your own Dissolver Rock on your side of the field, and they just play a monster in defense mode because they don't have anything that's higher than 900 attack, now that you have a wall here, you could feel safe to sacrifice your Dissolver Rock to bring out your own monster here. But I wouldn't recommend having it be a Summoned Skull, because Summoned Skull is one of the best one-tribute beaters, and as a result, he's also going to be one of the highest costing one-tribute beaters in the game of the Sacred Cards. So what you're more likely going to have to do is you're going to have to get a weaker 5-star monster, such as the Dark Witch. And this is an old card. This is from the Metal Raiders. This isn't a re-release Metal Raiders. This is an original Metal Raiders card from 2002. It was played heavily by a 9-year-old on the playgrounds, and it was also dropped into a puddle. That is why it looks so beaten up. I will also like to mention something, and why I hate Yu-Gi-Oh! Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, why I hate old Yu-Gi-Oh! Why I hate Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards in general, the card itself, is that they make them so inferior. Here is a Dragon Ball Z card, an old score card from like 2007. This is in much better shape. The edges don't look frayed at all. It's because they release these cards in the same way they release Pokemon cards, the same way they release Magic the Gathering cards. These cards are rounded at the edges, and they're a little bit thicker. These cards are not thicker. They are thinner. These Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards are thinner than these old score cards. And they're thinner than these old Pokemon cards. This is a Pokemon card from 1999, the very first set. It looks brand new, honestly. There's a little bit of scruffling on the sides here, but I have hundreds of these old, original first-gen Pokemon cards, and they are not beaten up that much at all. Compared to these cards here, compared to Lajin, compared to Dark Witch, look at the natural progression of wear and tear. The first thing that starts to go are the edges, and they naturally round themselves. New Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards are released with pointed edges. They're pointy. So the first thing that starts to go are these edges, and they will naturally round themselves over time. Isn't that funny? How they naturally end up looking like these Yu-Gi-Oh, these Pokemon cards, these Dragon Ball cards here. They already are released with rounded edges. They all are. Magic, Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, what other card games, they use this type of card format. I don't know why Yu-Gi-Oh is the only one that uses this type of card format, but it is just far more fragile than these. These cards are almost just as old as these, but these are in far worse shape than these ones are. That's crazy to me, isn't it? These are the first set of Pokemon cards. I have a bunch of these, man. Like, take a look at some of these cards here. But here's a Squirtle. This is one of my very first cards from the very first set. Here is a Charmeleon. These two are from the very first sets. Look at their good condition. The only thing that starts to fray are the little edges here, but the middle parts of the cards, they feel nice, they feel smooth. It's just the edges that start to get a little scruffed up here. That's because I put a rubber band around these as a friggin' 8-year-old. I mean, hey, what do you get? You know, it's 8 years old, man. That's how long ago these cards are, and they're in much better condition. But yeah, after that, a little sidetrack. They're going to have a monster in defense, and you're going to be sacrificing your Dissolver Rock for one of these cards instead. Now, I know, the Dark Witch is not that strong. It is far weaker than the Summon Skull, and your Dissolver Rock is far weaker than a Jirai Gumo. But, like I said, it's all about deck capacity and deck cost. If your Summon Skull here has a deck cost of 180, and the Dark Witch has a deck cost of 16, then it's no-brainer. You're going to want to put a Dark Witch into your deck instead of the Summon Skull as a 1-tribute monster. You're going to want to have maybe about 3 or 4 1-tribute monsters and maybe 1 2-tribute monster in your early deck. And that's what they're going to have in your early deck, their default deck. You're going to have maybe about 3 or 4 1-tribute monsters in your default deck and 1 2-tribute monsters. I think the 2-tribute monster they have in your default deck is Warrior from Another Planet. You sacrifice 2 monsters and it has 2350 attack points, and I think its effect is if it's the only monster on the field, it'll wipe out all of your opponent's monsters, but if you have other monsters on the field, it'll wipe yours out too. That's the actual card. I don't know if it has an effect in the game itself. It probably doesn't. Most cards don't. Here, I'll bring out these two early. I was going to talk about them later, but like I said, or later on in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, they released a lot of strong monsters, 4-star monsters like these, that were starting to give Legend a run for his money. We have the Bystroke Butcher, released in Metal Raiders, and all 3 of these were released in Metal Raiders: Dark Elf, Jirai Gumo, and the Bystroke Butcher. The Bystroke Butcher has the same attack points as the Legend card. The difference is that the Legend is still the superior card compared to the Bystroke Butcher, because the Bystroke Butcher has a downside effect. All 3 of these have downside effects. They're strong, but they have downside risk effects. I don't know why the Bystroke Butcher has one, though, because Legend doesn't have one, and he's stronger. They have the same stats here. The Bystroke Butcher has 1,000 defense. Legend has 1,000 defense. He has 1,800 attack. He has 1,800 attack. They're both Dark type, and they're both Fiend type. So there's absolutely no reason to have this card in your deck. There really isn't. And here's why. The effect for the Bystroke Butcher is when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent draws 2 cards. It's basically giving them a free pot of greed every time you attack. That is terrible. It is garbage. Nobody will be using the Bystroke Butcher in actual card game. But, thankfully, in the Sacred Cards, the Bystroke Butcher is one of the most useful cards you could get in the game. You can win it from Merrick. You can win it from a couple people. But you can also buy it in the card shop. It has a high deck cost, but it also doesn't have an effect. Let's talk about these other 2 here. These 2 were the actual people who beat Jirai, who actually beat Legend. Jirai Gumo and the Dark Elf. The Dark Elf had 2,000 attack. It's basically the Mystical Elf with reverse stats. The Mystical Elf was a good wall monster. It had high defense, 2,000 defense, and 800 attack. It was a defense wall monster, much like the Giant Soldier of Stone. The Jirai Gumo, though, is just a monster at the time. It's a 1. You can just bring it out. You don't have to summon, tribute, anything. And it has 2,200 attack. It was stronger than most level 5 cards at the time. Most level 5 cards go to 1,800. I have one here that goes to 2,100. Here's Mr. Volcano. He has 2,100 attack. The Jirai Gumo can still destroy Mr. Volcano. But the difference is this one can just be played. This one has to be sacrificed to summon, and he's still weaker than the Jirai Gumo. That is crazy, isn't it? Well, the reason why this guy's so powerful is because he has such a detrimental downside. His effect is whenever you attack, you have to flip a coin. If you call it correctly, you attack normally. If you get the coin wrong, you lose half of your life points, and then the attack continues. So the Jirai Gumo can still attack normally, but you will have bad life points lost. If you have 8,000 life points and you play Jirai Gumo right away, and you have him attack and you lose the coin toss, you have lost 4,000 life points, my friend. That is crazy. That is just, it makes him not usable except in a pinch. Let's say you're the one on the back foot. Let's say you're the one with like 200 life points left, and you need something to take out like their Lajin or something. You will play the Jirai Gumo, you'll lose 50 life points because you have 100 life points left, and you'll be able to take out their wall, their big beater monster or something. And then your Jirai Gumo will go again, and you'll go down to 25 life points because you only had 50 left. And you'll take out another one of their big monsters. It's a good desperation card, but it's just not feasible in my opinion. In the sacred cards, Jirai Gumo has no effect. You could just play them and attack as normally. Same with the Bistro Butcher. Let's talk once more about the Dark Elf here. Dark Elf's effect is it requires 1,000 attacks every single time you attack. That's 1,000 life points every single time you attack. That's pretty bad, but it's not as bad as the Jirai Gumo, and it's still stronger than Lajin. So if you're in a pinch and your enemy has Lajin on the field, you may have to play a Dark Elf to take out Lajin. Because if your opponent, if your plan is to play a Giant Soldier of Stone to get a Summoned Skull in the field, what if they also have a Summoned Skull? What if their plan is, if you plan to outwall them, right, then they may just sacrifice their Lajin and bring out a Summoned Skull. And then you will be on the back foot with your Summoned Skull. And you'll be a Summoned Skull versus a Summoned Skull. Right? So it's all about trying to get him out on the first turn he shows up. So you'll play a Dark Elf in desperation to get rid of the Lajin. And that's just 1,000 life points damage loss. It's helpful. But in the sacred cards, she has no effect. She just has 2,000 attack and she could just be played. But these 3 cards, alongside Lajin here, they're big beaters, right? They're beater cards. But they have no effect. These 3 have no effect on them. They could just be played like Lajin and attack as normal. That is incredibly powerful. But there is a downside. Like I mentioned, every card has a deck cost. These guys have high deck cost. Insanely high deck cost. You're not going to be able to use them until end game, like the very end of the game. So you're going to be summoning the Dark Witch here. This is a 1 tribute summon, getting rid of your Dissolver Rock here to summon the Dark Witch. The Dark Witch may be able to match Lajin and the Bistro Butcher in terms of attack points, but you're going to want to do this because she may only cost 16 deck cost to have her in your deck. This guy will have 200 deck cost to have him in your deck. So most opponents you're going to face are going to have similar deck cost to you in the early half of the game. They're not going to have these cards. So they're going to have to rely on tribute summoning as well. So you're going to have to rely on having monsters with 900 attack points and 2 or 3 stars at low deck cost to be able to summon single tribute monsters that are as strong as Jin in order to really win the game, because they're not going to have anything. Most people in the first half of the game are not going to have anything that are stronger than your Dark Witch, which has very low deck cost. Is all this making sense to you right now? Okay. I liked that, though. I liked that it required you to think. It required you to strategize. And it allowed you to use cards you generally would never use. I would never use the Dark Witch in an actual card game. I would never use her because she's pointless. She has 1800 attack. I could just play a Jin. I don't need the Dark Witch. I could just play Jin. And Jin was easily obtainable. He was in the Kaiba starter deck, and they were plentiful. You just needed to buy 3 Kaiba starter decks, and you had 3 Jins. He was very easily obtainable. Dark Witch was pretty easily obtainable in the Meta Raiders. She was a pretty common card. So, but the difference is you had to buy a bunch of booster packs to get her. I could just buy a Kaiba starter deck and I have a Legend right away. And I don't need a tribute summon to bring him out. But since she's useful in the first half of the Sacred Cards, I would be using her a lot more. I would be using characters like Mr. Volcano. I'd be using characters like, where is he? Spike Cedra. I had Spike Cedra, right? Yeah, here. Spike Cedra. I have characters like this being used a lot. And I would also be using tactical advantages, like you would use field spells like Yami, Sajin, Wasteland, or Mountain, Umi, and other. I don't feel like going to look for those, but here's 3 field spells right away. And these you would use in tandem with your either level 1 card monsters or your level 2 star monsters. And you have to keep track of the theme. For example, when you're facing off against Mako, he has water monsters, so you don't want to use an Umi because that'll power up his water monsters, and that will power down like your fire monsters. But if you have a Yami when you're fighting against Mako, Tsunami, you could use this in tandem with dark types like a Jin, like a Bistro Butcher. Oh, right, I was about to say, you can't summon those, that's too high cost. You'd want to use it in tandem with cards like Megasonic Eye. It's only a 1 tribute summon card. It may have only 1500 attack, but on a Yami field, it would be 2000. It would be a lot stronger than most monsters it'll be able to play. It'll be a lot stronger than the Dark Witch here. If they were able to get that on the field, your card would be now 2000 because of Yami field, and field spells are in this game, are in here, so you could be able to use this in tandem and get your field effect bonus. You could be able to play your Curse of Dragon, which is another 1 tribute monster, but in terms of 0 tribute monsters, Flame Ghost also gets an effect bonus due to being Dark type, which means he gets an extra 500 points to be a 1500 monster, which for single no tribute monsters is really good up to Mako. And so when you're fighting Mako up to Mako, that is pretty good, 1500. And that's what strategies are for. You'll be using these as strategies to boost up your low-cost monsters to be able to match a high-cost monster like Jin. Jin may get a field-type power bonus from this field and go from like 1800 to 2200, but he's already 1800 without a field power bonus. And this guy goes from 1500 to 2000. He's stronger than Jin in a Yami field. So if your enemy doesn't have a Jin, you have something that's stronger than Jin that costs maybe only 6 deck cost to bring out. That's crazy, but that's really good at the same time. That's why you're going to be using these and strategizing with these in the sacred cards in order to beat your opponents. You're going to be playing with weak cards, but you're going to be bumping them up, oomphing them up with equip cards and field power bonuses to make them be strong enough to defeat your enemy. That's how you that's how you would win in Forbidden Memories as well. You'd be managing the field power bonuses in Duelist of the Roses for the PS2. These games used a lot more strategy with weaker cards that you would never use, and that is something that I really loved about these older era games, is that they made you take heed of older cards. It was really good. I don't know how else I could say it, but it's really good to use these types of cards you would never use in tandem with field power bonus and strategy and stuff like that. I don't have anything else to say other than the Sacred Cards also has a password system. So if you have the Yami card, and which comes in the Starter Deck Yugi, this is a Starter Deck Yugi card. This one is a Legend of the Blue Eyes White Dragon Sojin card. This one's also from Legend of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Most of the field spell cards are from Legend of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. That's the very first booster deck. The Legend of the Blue Eyes White Dragon booster pack came out before Starter Deck Yugi and Starter Deck Kaiba. Those are the very first starter decks. So if you had a lot of these opening cards, like the Curse of Dragon, and if you were playing by Metal Raiders, this came out after Metal Raiders, so you would be able to have a bunch of these cards, like these. This one's from Legend of Blue Eyes. This one is from Psychic, so PSV, so you probably wouldn't have that one. But you'd have that one, that's Metal Raiders. That's Metal Raiders. That's Metal Raiders. Starter Deck Kaiba. Legend of the Blue Eyes. You probably wouldn't have a Dissolver Rock in your opening deck, but he's actually a really good low-cost monster to have, because he also has 1,000 defense points, and most monsters you're going to be facing off against, Bones and Rex, they're probably not going to have 1,000 attack points. So you're going to be able, you could use Dissolver Rock really well. So if you don't have one in your deck at the start of the game, you can go into the card shop and use this little code at the bottom. Like, for example, Dissolver Rock has a code that says 408-26495. If you put that code in, Dissolver Rock will unlock into the card shop, and he's pretty cheap to purchase. You have to purchase all of the cards you use with the password system for, and most of these are cheap, except for cards like Jirai Gumo, because high deck cost, also high card cost at the store to purchase, and that's for a reason. These cards are really good. You get a bunch of these cards, you win the game immediately, and I do mean immediately. By the end of the game, these battles will probably end by your third or fourth turn. Why? Well, let's see. If you had 4 Dark Elves, 4 Legends, 4 Jirai Gumos, and 4 Bistro Butchers, let's say on your first turn, you lay out a Mystical Elf. Your enemy has nothing that can beat that, so they put a monster in defense mode. You, on your next turn, you play the Bistro Butcher. You destroy this monster with the Bistro Butcher, and you take out 2,000 life points damage. Now they're down to 6,000. Next turn, they play another monster in defense mode. You decide to play Legend. Legend destroys that monster, and then you deal 3,800 life points damage from their already existing 6,000. So that gets them down to 2,200. So the very next turn, they're done. You don't really need to summon anything else, but you decide to do so anyway. So you just summon Jirai Gumo, and they place a monster in defense mode. It's already over. It's already over. When you're facing off against a real player, because this does have 2-player capability, I think, you would just have to have a Game Link cable, 2 copies of the game, and 2 Game Boy Advances. But you can play multiplayer. You can use your badass deck like this versus another person's badass deck like this, and test your luck and see who has the better beater deck, combined with some really good trap cards and magic cards. One of the best trap cards to use is a card called Torrential Tribute. Torrential Tribute is if you play your Jirai Gumo and you decide to attack the opponent's life points directly, you're not going to be able to. Torrential Tribute activates, your card is gone. But if you're able to play a Yami field on your first turn, you get a Yami card, then you play a Bistro Butcher. Bistro Butcher benefits from the field power bonus, so he gets up to 2,300 attack points. That is crazy. And then you'll get another one with 2,300 attack points with your Lajin Mystical Genie of the Lamp. And then another one here, Dark Elf. She goes up to 2,500 attack points under the Yami field. That is crazy. Nothing the enemy has, unless it's these guys as well, are going to be able to stop you. Jirai Gumo is weaker than all three of these cards under the Yami field spell. Even Jirai Gumo, one of the best cards you can get, is weaker than these three under the Yami field power bonus. So most beater decks with these guys in it are going to have a Yami card. They're still going to have Jirai Gumo, because 2,200 attack points is still really good by itself. So before they're able to play the Yami field spell, 2,200 is still going to be better than these other three cards. But that's the strategy you're going to be having for the final battles versus Yugi, versus Dark Merrick, and versus another player if you decide to do two-player back in the day. I really liked this game. I really liked the strategy, and I really liked that it forces you to use cards that you would never use. I would never use these cards. And in the actual card game itself, nobody uses Flame Ghost. Nobody. Nobody's gonna fuse Flame Ghost together. He's garbage. He is absolute trash. I could play Giant Soldier of Stone without sacrificing, without fusing, and he's stronger than the friggin' Flame Ghost. And he is supposed to be a defensive monster. That is why, this card game, this GBA game is so much fun. I get to mix and match cards I would never use. I would never use these people. I would never use these cards. And I might use this one. That's actually a pretty good wall card. I would never use Sword Stalker. I would never use, let's see, Curse of Dragon by itself. There's a update Curse of Dragon, the Curse Dragon card with an effect. I would use that one, but I wouldn't use this one. But you could use all of these cards, and even Skull Knight, the mighty Skull Knight, can be played, and it's not a fusion card in this game. You just play it. You could just play it, and it's great. It is fantastic. That's why I like these older PS1, GBA, and PS2 Yu-Gi-Oh games. It's because they modify the rules of the card game to turn it into a sort of JRPG, where almost every single card has its own use. From early game, playing strategically, utilizing Dark Witch and Dissolver Rock, and Doran with his effect, utilizing field power bonuses with Yami alongside the Dark Elf and other types of cards like that to be able to get your wins. It's just a fantastic time, and I really liked it. And maybe if you're a big fan of this early era of Yu-Gi-Oh! And all of these beat-up cards that a 9-year-old played heavily with on the playground back in the day 22 years ago, you might find these old games like the Sacred Cards to be really fun, because modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! I gave up as soon as I looked at these. I gave up. I couldn't do it. I might later on after I learn a little bit more, but I already know how to play old era. I already know how to play all of these cards. I already know most of them are useless, but at least in this game, most of them have a use, and that makes me appreciate them more.